If you've ever cut carbs and suddenly felt tired, unfocused, or weak, you're not alone. But here's the surprising part. It's not the low carbs causing the problem. It's how your body is producing energy. Today, we're breaking down the real science behind low carb versus keto and which one actually gives you more energy. Low-carb and keto diets are often grouped together, but metabolically, they work very differently. One relies on glucose, the other on ketones, and that difference has a major impact on your daily energy, mental clarity, and performance. When someone follows a low-carbohydrate diet, the body's primary energy system does not completely change. It simply becomes more constrained. To understand this, we need to look at how energy is normally produced. Under typical dietary conditions, carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. This glucose enters the bloodstream and is used by cells as a fast and efficient source of energy. Excess glucose is stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles, creating a short-term energy reserve. On a standard diet, this system works smoothly because glucose is consistently replenished. In a low-carb diet, carbohydrate intake is reduced but not eliminated. This means glucose is still the body's main fuel source, but the supply is limited. As a result, blood glucose levels tend to be lower, and glycogen stores are smaller. The body must now carefully manage how and when it uses glucose, which can lead to noticeable changes in energy levels. Because glucose availability is reduced, the body relies more heavily on glycogen reserves. However, these reserves are finite and can be depleted quickly, especially during physical activity or prolonged periods without eating. Once glycogen levels drop, the body may struggle to maintain consistent energy output. This is why many people experience energy dips, fatigue, or mental fog on a low-carb diet, particularly in the early stages. Importantly, a low-carb diet does not usually push the body fully into ketosis. Ketosis is a metabolic state where fat is converted into ketones, which can serve as an alternative fuel source. On most low-carb diets, carbohydrate intake remains high enough to prevent consistent ketone production. This leaves the body in a metabolic middle ground, still dependent on glucose but without an abundant supply of it. To compensate, the body may increase gluconeogenesis, a process where glucose is created from non-carbohydrate sources, such as protein and amino acids. While this mechanism helps maintain blood glucose levels, it is slower and less efficient than using dietary carbohydrates directly. This added metabolic demand can contribute to feelings of low energy, especially during periods of stress or high activity. Another factor is insulin signaling. Lower carbohydrate intake generally reduces insulin levels, which can be beneficial for metabolic health. However, insulin still plays a role in transporting glucose into cells. With less glucose available overall, even small fluctuations in insulin can affect energy delivery to tissues, including the brain. In summary, low-carb diets produce energy primarily through glucose metabolism, but with reduced fuel availability. The body continues to rely on glucose and glycogen while only partially increasing fat usage. This creates a system that can work well for some people, particularly those with lower energy demands, but it can also lead to inconsistent energy levels if carbohydrate intake is too low to support glucose needs and not low enough to trigger full fat adaptation. The ketogenic diet fundamentally changes how the body produces and uses energy. Unlike a low-carb diet, which still relies primarily on glucose, the keto diet is designed to shift the body into a distinct metabolic state known as ketosis. In this state, fat becomes the dominant fuel source, and energy production follows a different, more stable pathway. When carbohydrate intake is reduced to very low levels, typically below 20 to 50 grams per day, blood glucose levels fall significantly. As a result, insulin levels also drop. This hormonal shift signals the body that glucose is no longer readily available and that an alternative fuel source is required to meet energy demands. In response, the liver begins converting fatty acids into molecules called ketone bodies, primarily beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and acetone. These ketones are released into the bloodstream and transported to tissues throughout the body, including the brain. Unlike fatty acids, which cannot directly cross the blood-brain barrier in significant amounts, ketones provide a reliable and efficient fuel source for the brain when glucose is scarce. One of the key advantages of ketone-based energy is stability. Fat stores in the body are large and continuously available, even in lean individuals. This means that once the body adapts to using ketones, energy supply becomes far less dependent on meal timing or carbohydrate intake. Many people on a ketogenic diet report fewer energy crashes and more consistent mental focus as a result. The process of becoming efficient at using ketones is known as fat adaptation. During this transition period, which can take several days to a few weeks, the body upregulates enzymes involved in fat oxidation and ketone utilization. Initially, some individuals experience fatigue or weakness as their metabolism adjusts. However, once adaptation occurs, muscles and the brain become highly effective at using ketones for sustained energy. Another important aspect of keto metabolism is reduced reliance on glycogen. While some glycogen remains in the muscles and liver, it is conserved and used more strategically. During physical activity, especially at moderate intensities, the body can rely heavily on fat and ketones, preserving glycogen and delaying fatigue. Ketone metabolism also produces less oxidative stress per unit of energy compared to glucose metabolism. This may partially explain reports of improved mental clarity and cognitive endurance among keto dieters. Additionally, stable insulin levels reduce fluctuations in blood sugar, further supporting consistent energy delivery to cells. In summary, the ketogenic diet produces energy by shifting the body away from glucose dependence and toward fat-derived ketones. This metabolic reprogramming allows access to a large, steady energy reserve and reduces the highs and lows associated with glucose-based fuel systems. While keto is not ideal for everyone, especially without proper adaptation, it offers a fundamentally different and often more stable approach to energy production compared to low-carb diets. One of the most important differences between glucose-based energy and ketone-based energy is stability. While both fuels can power the body, they do so in fundamentally different ways, leading to very different day-to-day energy experiences. Glucose is a fast-burning fuel. When carbohydrates are consumed, they are quickly broken down into glucose and released into the bloodstream. This rapid availability allows glucose to deliver immediate energy, which is especially useful during high-intensity activities. However, this speed comes with a trade-off. Blood glucose levels rise quickly after eating and then fall as glucose is taken up by cells or stored as glycogen. These fluctuations are a normal part of glucose metabolism, but they can also create noticeable energy peaks and crashes. Insulin plays a central role in this process. When blood glucose rises, insulin is released to help transport glucose into cells. Once glucose is cleared from the bloodstream, insulin levels fall. For some individuals, especially those who are insulin sensitive or consuming irregular meals, this cycle can result in periods of low blood sugar. When this happens, the brain may experience reduced fuel availability, leading to symptoms such as fatigue, irritability, or difficulty concentrating. Ketones, by contrast, provide a slower and more consistent source of energy. Ketone production is driven by fat availability rather than recent food intake. Because body fat stores are large and continuously accessible, ketone levels in the blood tend to remain relatively stable once a person is fully fat adapted. This stability reduces dependence on frequent meals and minimizes sharp energy swings. Another key factor is how the brain uses fuel. The brain requires a constant energy supply and is particularly sensitive to drops in blood glucose. When relying primarily on glucose, even small fluctuations can affect mental clarity and focus. Ketones, however, cross the blood-brain barrier efficiently and provide a steady energy source. This is why many people report improved cognitive endurance and mental consistency on a ketogenic diet. Energy stability also affects physical performance, especially during prolonged or moderate intensity activity. Glucose-based energy systems rely heavily on glycogen, which is limited and can be depleted within hours. Once glycogen is exhausted, fatigue sets in quickly. Ketone-based systems, on the other hand, allow muscles to rely more heavily on fat and ketones, preserving glycogen and extending endurance. It is important to note that glucose is not inherently bad. It is highly effective for short bursts of intense activity and is essential in certain physiological contexts. The issue arises when energy demands exceed glucose availability or when fluctuations disrupt consistent energy delivery. In contrast, ketones offer a metabolic environment designed for long-term energy balance rather than rapid output. In summary, glucose provides fast but variable energy, while ketones deliver slower, more stable energy. This difference in fuel dynamics explains why some people experience energy crashes on glucose-dependent diets and more consistent energy on ketogenic diets. Understanding this distinction helps clarify why diet choice can significantly impact both physical endurance and mental clarity.
So the real question isn't whether low carb or keto is better, it's which energy system works best for your body. In the next video, we'll cover how long it actually takes to become fat adapted and what mistakes to avoid. If you want more science-based nutrition breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.